Brady Foulk, an expert in dog behavior and psychology, has a passion for empowering strong bonds between dogs and their owners. A global keynote speaker, entrepreneur, and philanthropist, Brady embraces a proactive mindset. Dog owners learn to transform their roles from mere pet owners to effective leaders in their canine relationships. Whether it's honing the skills of service dogs or instilling a sense of calm and security in emotional support animals, Brady's holistic approach resonates deeply with every furry friend and their loving owners. Welcome to our show, Brady.
Thank you so much for having me. And I want all your audience to know if you're listening because you have a dog, or if you have a dog and you want them to listen better, you're in the right place. We're going to talk about it. And if you don't just want your dog to listen better, but you want to have some new leadership skills and to see how psychology and dog training interact, you're also in the right place. So I'm happy to share some tips and tricks over the next, like 30, 40 minutes or so.
Perfect. Brady, what do we know? What does science tell us about this wonderful relationship between humans and dogs?
Yeah, they tell us that the brain works very simply and it's constantly making associations all day long. So, what does the garbage truck mean? What does the person walking past us mean? It's creating stories. And it also says that humans and dogs do things for only two reasons, either to get pleasure or to avoid pain. And so there's elegant ways to apply pain and pleasure. And so we're going to chat about that today and what that looks like. But it's quite simple if you break down how our brain's working.
Wow. Yes, I'd like to know more about that because humans and dogs share one common thing. That is, we're both social animals. We don't like living alone, and we know that from human research that people who live alone, who don't have any social connections, have a problem eventually with mental issues.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's widely proven. If you put someone in solitary confinement, it's kind of the worst thing you could do to someone is take away everything. And there's even a amazing study where they took rice and they put it in a jar. And one jar of rice, they said, I love you and thank you too. One jar of rice, they said, I hate you. I hope you die, rice. I hope you grow mold. And the other rice they put in a cabinet, right? And they tested which one grew mold the fastest, what type of mold, kind of like what happened to them, right? Can you guess which one made it the best, the longest without growing mold? The first, second, or third?
Yeah, we don't need any guessing, do we?
No, the first one was the I love you, but the worst one was kind of the surprising one. I thought it would be the one that you're like actively saying I hate you to, but no, it was actually the one that you completely ignore. That's more painful than like someone saying I hate you, because at least they're acknowledging that you're alive. So this social thing that you just described, it's very important for dogs. I think it's a need for dogs to have social interactions and have that family.
Yeah. Can you tell us a bit about how dogs communicate with their human owners?
Yeah, it's a lot of body language. So you can pay attention to if they're yawning or if they're licking their lips or if they're shaking or if the hair on their back stands up. There's quite a few different body language things that they're communicating with. And then I'm a firm believer, being a dog trainer, obviously, and teaching them how to communicate with us. So all of these things, like a shoe, the word shoe is just a symbol to us, right? It represents something. And so for our dogs, we're looking to establish words to them that represent behaviors like sitting or laying down or going to their crate or whatever it may be, right? So communicating, to me, it goes back to that first principle of how the brain works, the associations. And Pavlov, this is Pavlovian conditioning. You ring the bell, you present the food, the dog salivates. The dog salivates naturally, right? But we just want to put it on a cue. So the dog sits naturally, the dog sleeps naturally, the dog goes to the crate naturally. I just want to put these things on cue so I can say, go to your crate. And now we're communicating with them. And it's important that we also recognize the body language too, because sometimes things aren't being communicated as we think they are.
What is the common mistake dog owners make with their pets?
Yeah, the biggest mistake is taking too big of chunks. So as humans, we like to chunk thing. It's a very helpful behavior. It's how we can remember more than 7 things, right? You can chunk a longer digit into sections. And sometimes I taught my dog how to get a beer, open the fridge, get a beer, and bring it to me, and then shut the fridge, right? You can chunk that in many ways. You could chunk that as just one behavior. If you were to try to train that as one thing, you would never get there. It wouldn't work. So most humans, they try to chunk a big behavior and it's too big. And so the way I describe it to people is, if you have a kid, do you have children?
I don't have children.
You know, I'm the oldest of six. I don't have kids either, but I've been around a lot of kids. And when kids are learning to talk and they're asking for water and they come up to you and they're like, Wawa or Waller, you don't look at them and say, you idiot, it's water. I'm not going to give it to you. You go, oh, I know what you mean. I'm going to help you get this thing, right? Now, after a few months, you may challenge them and they may say like Wawa or Waller, and you're like, Wada? And they're like, Wada, and they maybe mirror you a little bit. That's one way you could get a behavior. And you keep challenging them, right? So you go to the next step. So you're just breaking it down in different smaller chunks. And then after a few more months, it goes from Wawa to Waller to Wada to Water. And so you go through a progression, but in all of this time, you know that you're going to get there. You're just going through the journey. So the biggest mistake is people don't appreciate the journey and they just want to just have them say water perfectly the first time. And it's like, it doesn't work like that. Nothing works like that.
Mm. Are there big differences between different types of breed?
Yes, there are big differences, and some trainers focus, and there's lots of ways to train and things to focus on. Some trainers focus on only breed specific things. And I have an Australian Shepherd. So one of the breed things with them is they like to nip and they like to herd things. So that does play into my mindset of training and being aware of this behavior, and giving them something else to do if they start nipping me, like going for a toy or something different, right? Uh, but my big thing, right, is I'm looking how to train animals using principles. And that's why I described the classical conditioning and operant conditioning. So those two principles work on all animals. You could use that with dolphins, with chickens, with cows, with pigs. And I've trained a pig how to paint, and she's raised over $10,000 for a nonprofit, right? So that has nothing to do with breed. It just has to do with what associations I created for her and what I reinforced.
Okay, and how do you do that? Can you just elaborate on that?
Uh-huh. This is another brilliant one. I chunked it, right? I taught a pig how to paint. That's one chunk in your brain. But in my brain, that's 3 chunks at least, right? That's teaching a retrieve. I have to teach her how to pick up the paintbrush. And then I got to teach her how to hold on to the paintbrush to hold it for duration, and then move it around the canvas, right? So like these are different parts that we focused on differently. So the first thing I did is I just taught her how to pick up. Um, I didn't start with a paintbrush, actually. I started with a bowl. And so there was this bowl that I would like toss treats in, and I taught her how to go down and bend up and pick it up, right? And so I built that behavior for a few weeks. And then once she was really good at that, I swapped in the paintbrush, and then I trained it the same way. She would go down to snip the paintbrush at first, and I would click. And then I'm creating this, oh, this is something, there's consciousness happening, right? I just want you to be like, something is going on. And then, the next thing she like tries to pick it up with her mouth, and I click again and she lets go. I give her a treat, and then we just build this behavior to where she can hold it for longer and longer. And then I introduce the easel, right? The board and the paper, right? And then I put some paint on it. But I've already built her being able to pick it up, and I've already built how long she's been able to hold it for. And now I just need a way for her to start moving her head, right? And so you can start teaching her how to move their heads in circles or up and down. And next thing you know, it's abstract painting, but she's taking a paintbrush and putting it on a piece of paper.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, they say pigs are highly intelligent animals, almost or sometimes even more intelligent than dogs. That's quite
Mm-hmm.
amazing.
Yeah, the prefrontal cortex is about 14% of their brain. Well, dogs sits like around 12, 13. So the prefrontal cortex is your decision making and thought processing part of your brain.
Hmm. Uh, can you explain a bit the principle of leadership and dog training? Because
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah, this one's really big because there's many ways you can lead. There's many ways you can get behaviors. And going back in time, people used to use chairs and whips, and now we've gotten to the point to where gorillas can willingly stick their hand through and like get shots and get injected. And now Elon's even training monkeys how to play video games. I don't know if you know Neuralink at all. Um, but these are all trained behaviors, and there's different ways you can get behaviors. And I'll share a story with you because it just paints the picture. Because my my shirt was ripped and the police had just arrived to our door, okay? And what had happened was I had a feeling my roommate was doing something not so nice to my dog. So I pretended to leave the house and I set up a camera to watch what he did. And sure enough, my dog was doing something he didn't like. So he opened up the door and kicked him. And then he went over there and started punching him. And it lit a fire inside of me. And he just went back inside and started doing the dishes. And like I was in my room watching this all happen. And I went out there and I grabbed him and I threw him to the ground and we started wrestling for a bit. And as I wanted to just really mess up this guy, I thought like this doesn't make me any better than him, right? I'm using the same type of fear. And anywho, we separated. I called the police to report the incident. They told me there's nothing they could do, and just to find a new roommate, right? But it taught me a huge lesson. As I mentioned, getting results. There's more things that are important. I think there's three ways you can get a result. You can use intimidation, you can use bribes, and you can use growth, right? All three are going to work. They all have their own downfalls, but only one's going to give you connection with your animal or your partner or your friend or whoever it may be. So I ask people to remember, do you remember the leaders who intimidated and bribed you? And as you think back, you probably knew what was happening, right? You're like, okay, I'll take this money and I'll do this thing, but I'm not going to like do it willingly. And then remember the leaders who inspired you and rewarded you for doing the hard things and growing. Like those are the ones we can hear their voices and hear see their faces and remember how they made us feel. So for me, leadership is much more than getting a result. I mentioned I'm the oldest of six, and one of my siblings told me they weren't doing what I said. So I took their crayons and I melted them. Right. And I said, you better do what I say or I'm going to do this. Right. And I've yelled at my dog and I've intimidated him. And I've also bribed him before when I didn't know what I was doing. And I believe in the story of redemption and being able to learn from these things and going, what is sustainable? And how do I want my dog to remember me as a leader? Do I want them to be like, oh, I'm just doing this so they don't hurt me? Or are they doing it because they enjoy working with me and they like working through hard things? So I tell people, when you get really mad, when you get furious, take a breath, get curious. You're chunking things too big, chunk them down a little bit smaller, give them like a fourth grade problem instead of an 11th grade problem, and you're going to be okay.
Yeah, what I find so amazing about dogs is that they obviously sense what a person is like. Uh, there's some theories that they can even smell anger and hate and
Mm-hmm.
different and smell love and compassion.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
my theory is that a dog knows what a bad human being is.
Yeah, no, they've done studies on it, right? They had people watch a really scary movie, The Shining, for example, and they took their sweat samples, right? And then they had people watch a really happy movie like Frozen or a Disney movie, and they took their sweat samples. And sure enough, when you're really scared or you're thinking about these things, you're emitting certain chemicals, right? Your cortisol levels up versus when you're really happy, there's other things being released. So they put this dog into a room with different sweat samples and a person across the room, and the dog had never met the person. And they smelled the sweat. And when they smelled the scary sweat from The Shining, they ran away. Some of the dogs wouldn't even go back in the room. And they said, this person is scary. I don't like this person just from the smell. And then when they smelled the happy movie, they went over and started wagging their tail, started saying hi to the people. You're totally right. They're
Mm.
smelling everything.
Yeah, getting back to positive reinforcement, there's some theories that you shouldn't give a dog a treat if it does a positive action. How do you go about it?
Yeah, there's a few things, right? So positive isn't permissive. You want to make sure like what you're reinforcing you want to see repeated. And yet you also have to be mindful of emotional problems. So there's like trained behaviors that you can learn, and then there's emotional things that you have to overcome. You could think about it like public speaking, right? You could have a lot of skills, but you could still get really nervous on stage. And you could be great in front of 1 people or 10 people, but you could get really nervous in front of 1,000 or 10,000 people, right? So at that point, it's not a skills thing, it's an emotional thing. And so you want to then create a lot of positive emotions and have a lot of anchors to positive things. So like for me, before I get on stage, I have certain incantations that I say. I go into a certain body, like a physical state, you know? And it's something that I've trained over and over again, but I've associated to really positive memories. So dogs are the same way. So if you, were you saying not rewarding a dog for when they do something wrong or when they do something positive?
They do
Can you
something,
clarify?
yeah, if they do something positive, like I call the dog, he comes back to me, I pat him, I praise him. Uh, but initially, when my dog was a puppy, I used to give him a treat. Uh,
Hmm.
and then I stopped that after a while. And then, of course, she came when I called her.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's great. It's the same thing with casinos, right? Casinos don't got to pay you every time to keep going. It's on a variable schedule, and the variability is what keeps people guessing. So when you're first training a behavior, yes, you got to make sure you're rewarded over and over again. But I had a client who's, when a dog's learning potty training, you bring some treats out, you give them a treat, right? The dog learned it could pee 4 or 5 times and get a treat each time. And I'm like, no, you get one treat from one pee session. Sure enough, the dog stopped peeing 5 times, you know?
Okay, yeah. Uh, so just explain a bit how you go about with your method of dog training, which is obviously something very specific, which is different from what we normally term as dog training.
Yeah, I hope, and I have a good feeling that this is where the industry is heading, that we're going away from e-collars and prong collars and more towards science-based and psychology-based training. And this has been around for a long time. Bob Bailey had the IQ Zoo, and he trained bunnies how to like pick up coins and pigs how to pick up coins and put them in piggy banks and like all sorts of fun and neat little tricks, right? And I was even in Cancun and they had these falcons around. And I was like, why are these falconers around? And I don't speak Spanish, my girlfriend does. And I was like, can you ask them what's going on? And they train these birds to keep away all of the other birds from these resorts, right? And so there's things happening all over the place with dog training. So all I'm doing with dog training is I believe a lot in choices, and I want the dog to become a thinking dog. I don't want to have to micromanage my dog all the time. So I want to present them with the choice, and I want them to enjoy making the right choice. And that kind of follows grandma's rule. What that means for me, I don't know if it meant for you, but if friends were to come over and they say, like, can Brady come and play? My mom would look at me and she goes, is your room clean? If my room is clean, I'm good. If my room's not clean, I can't go play with my friends. That is painful to me. And yet I had the choice to keep my room clean or to make it dirty. There's nothing she did, right? So dogs, I want the same thing. I want them to realize if someone knocks on the door, we've done training to show you when someone knocks on the door, I run to my bed, but I still give you the choice. And if you decide to leave your bed and go run to the front door, then the person doesn't come inside, right? And they step back outside and the dog's like, what the heck? And then they run back to their bed and then the person comes inside. So I'm setting up situations like this so the dog is learning that their actions are meaningful and I'm listening to their actions, right? And I'm rewarding the ones that I want them to have and I'm not rewarding the ones I don't want them to have. And then in the background, I'm making sure that I condition that the sound of the knock means go to your bed, or when I say sit, it means sit, or when I say come, it means come. And I do this in a fun way, like teaching coming when called. Dogs are prey animals. They like to chase you. So I'll run back and forth, and I'll drop a treat and I'll say search and they'll get it and I'll take off and I'll run in the other room. And then I'll say pup, 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 and they sprint after me as fast as they can. And then we take this game outside and I'll like, I'll have someone hold the leash and they create a little opposition reflex. And then I'll run away again and I'll run behind a tree and then they'll fly. the emotional connection they have to that memory is like playing, for me, soccer and like chasing after, like going down for a long ball, or baseball or football, whatever it may be. But we want to create that emotional connection with the dog is really important. That's why play is very, very important. And then we want to make sure that we condition the behaviors over and over until it sticks. If you go to the gym one time, you're not going to be able to keep your muscles. You got to keep showing up. And then we want to make sure that we shape it and that they understand good things happen when they follow our rules. And when they don't follow our rules, they don't get to go see their friends. They don't get to go play.
Yeah, you just mentioned the play thing, which is obviously very important in dogs. They are very
Huge.
juvenile animals. How can we keep our dog happy? It's not just going for walks, is it?
No, I really believe that you can go, walks are great for dogs, right? And I recommend you take your dog more on more than one walk, because there's a lot of things to smell. There's a lot of the world, right? They're getting a lot of enrichment through that. And I also believe that to overcome frustration, games are the best way to do it. And you lose in games, and there's even like puzzles you can buy online for your dog to start them off, right? But I'm teaching my littlest dog, she's 8 months old, how to ride a skateboard. Riding a skateboard is a challenging thing, right? There's some fears she has to overcome because this thing is moving a little bit. It's not a little bit, it moves really fast. So I had to take rubber bands and put them around the wheel so it didn't roll as fast, right? I baby proofed it a little bit. And I didn't even start there. I taught her how to stand on a blanket, and then I had a skateboard without wheels, and I taught her how to stand on that. And then I got the skateboard with wheels, and I taught her how to stand on that, So I chunked it down into smaller parts for her. But this behavior for her taught her a bunch of different things. And this is a game to us, right? She's riding a skateboard. It teaches her balance. It teaches her how to target her paws onto something. It teaches her how to stay on something for duration. It teaches her how to work through challenges and work with me. And so there's a lot of things that are happening that sometimes people don't notice, right? But that's why games are so important. When I was playing baseball or soccer and they tell me to go play right mid or go play the outfield or something, like they're telling me how to follow rules and to play by the rules. Rules are really important to have success.
Yeah. Let's talk a bit about emotional support animals. Humans have this tendency of humanizing their pets, but obviously a dog has different needs than a human. And sometimes I feel an animal is being abused if you turn it into an emotional support animal.
Yeah, so the emotional support animal, right? There's a difference, right? There's a dog who provides a service for emotional support and they help ground a person, and there's things that they're specifically doing. And then there's animals that sometimes people they put their baggage on, and they're transferring their anxiety and their stuff to their dog, and they're not teaching their dog how to help them cope with it. They're just both getting more and more anxious, right? And that could start by just going out on a walk. And women, let me ask you this. When was the last time you were afraid for your life going on a walk?
I can't really remember.
Neither can I. I
Yeah,
look forward to someone trying
yeah,
something because then I get to practice my jujitsu,
yeah.
right? But women aren't the same way. There's a lot of times women, it's a little bit scarier being a woman. And I don't know if any of the audience are women right now listening, but sometimes when you're on a walk and you see someone scary, that can transfer to the dog too. And then the dog picks up, oh, you're sweating, smells differently. This is a scary moment. I need to be scared now too. And this happens over and over again with sounds that are happening outside or people knocking at the door or whatever it may be. And so it's a moment to have the dog step up in a way and to as the human, right, show the dog that it doesn't mean that these things are scary. Like a true emotional support dog or a service dog, they're not going to get scared by these things because they're grounded, they're confident because they're meant to be confident. And that's where I'm as a trainer, I come in too. I help people become aware of what's happening and some of these things, right? And if you're walking in a scary place, let's find somewhere that you feel really safe to walk in. Like, let's change the environment. We don't have to be naive about our thinking and be like, I'm safe, I'm safe, I'm safe. No, like we're going to change our procedure, where we're going, or our perception. So I think dogs can help people overcome different emotional problems. But I do think that it is important to notice um, the difference between like a trained emotional support animal and someone who needs an emotional support animal. So they get a dog and the dog isn't trained and they're just both getting triggered by the same things and they're both having the same emotional chemical response inside.
Mm,
We
mm.
can dive more into that, but I just wanted to
Yeah,
clarify that real
yeah,
quick.
yeah. What I noticed is that if an elderly woman with a small Yorkshire Terrier goes for a walk and then there's big dogs around, obviously she's afraid her dog's going to be bitten. And then
Yeah.
yeah, and that, of course, uh, the dog picks it up and then
And
yaps
the dog
and
starts barking.
barking,
Yeah,
barking at bigger dogs, and then there's a big danger of it being bitten. Yeah.
exactly. Exactly. So I would tell her, yeah, that's an interesting one because both of you have to understand that even if something were to happen, you have the resources to overcome it. And by like, sometimes I like to tell people that by having this response, by feeling these feelings, you're making it more likely that something bad's going to happen because these other dogs are picking up on it too. And they're like, oh, this dog, there's something weird happening here. We don't like it and we want to stop it. So it's just like taking a breath, either staying away from those situations if it's possible, and then training your dog and yourself how to just sit on a bench and just watch these guys and feel good about watching them, right? I work with a lot of yappy dogs. And so it's a lot of just like bird watching, dog watching, squirrel watching. This is okay.
Mm. Going back to the pandemic, well, I live here in Spain, and we had a lot of people getting dogs during the pandemic because they were living alone. They wanted a comfort dog. And after the pandemic was over, we had so many dogs then and landing up again in shelters because I think many people were just not aware of what a dog really needs and
Yeah.
transferring all their own anxieties onto the dog and having some living being in their room or apartment, but the dog's needs weren't being met, and then the dogs obviously uh, showed aggression or some other misbehavior, and the people just gave up and put the dogs in shelters.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a tough one. I growing up, and that's kind of what motivated me to get started, is I saw that a lot as a kid. My parents would get a dog and we had a big family, so it was nice to have a dog, but the dog was too much. We wouldn't take it on walks. We wouldn't feed it at the right time, so it would eat the trash. And next thing you know, we have to go give this dog to a farm or like it just runs away and ends up in a shelter. And I saw it happen over and over and over again. And so when I got my dog, I was like, that's not going to be my dog. That's not my story. And it almost was my story. But then I realized you have to if your approach doesn't work, you have to change your approach. And it's not a bad dog. I've learned like they're not bad dogs, right? Our dogs are just mirror images of like our training. So it's finding someone who has the skills, who's already gone through these things, and having the humility. Those who are great know that there's people better than them. So it's like having the humility to go ask for help. I ask for help all the time. I pay coaches for all sorts of things,
Mm.
um, and getting those skills and then following through with it a lot of the time, and then enjoying it. Because I believe these animals are spiritual animals. They're here to teach us a lesson, and you can get rid of that lesson. Or sometimes in relationships, a partner is here to teach you a lesson, and you could just break up with them or divorce them and not learn the lesson. But guess what? You take you with you to the next relationship. You're gonna have the same shit come up with the same dog. That's why it happened with my family over and over again. So go
Mm.
and learn the lessons. It's fun.
So that started you off on the journey to become a dog trainer?
Growing up, yeah, I loved animals. We had lots of animals. And then when I was 22 years old, I got my first dog, Australian Shepherd. And my family used intimidation a lot of the times to train. And I decided I was going to use bribes and I was like an excessive amount of love. And so he would sleep in my bed and had full reign of the house. And it destroyed the house. I lost my deposit. I hit my rock bottom. And then I was like, okay, pain doesn't really work that well. Yeah, bribes don't work that well. Like, what's next? And I found Susan Garrett, who teaches through games. She's a 7-time world agility champion with different dogs, right? That's a big thing. Someone could have one amazing dog, but if you do it with 6 other dogs, it's like, okay, there's repeatability to this. So yeah, that's how I really began getting started into it.
Mm. Brady, we've got a global audience, but you have such important tips and advice for dog owners. Do you provide online coaching and training for dog owners? How can people connect with you?
Yes, I do. So I offer Zoom lessons. So that's something that I started doing during COVID, and that's definitely possible. And my biggest way, though, is to have more groups. And if we could have a worldwide group in my book club, that'd be amazing. I like books. I'm a big reader. I believe leaders are readers. So there's a book called Don't Shoot the Dog and Fire Child, Water Child. So I'm leading a group of my current clients and other people who want to join in this book club so we can share wins about dogs, talk about problems about dogs, and then also learn from other people who study dogs and experiments and stuff because I enjoy reading about um, all the different facets of dog training, you know?
Yes, and we'll post those links in the show notes below. You can be reached obviously also through social media and
Definitely. Yeah. So yeah, shoot me a message on Instagram or TikTok at my name is New Direction Dog Training, as you see this side. And my Instagram handle is N as in Nancy, D as in Drew Dog Training. So ND Dog Training. And if you DM me book club, I'll send you a link for 3 free months to join our book club. And if you DM me Dream Dog, I'll send you a PDF with some games you can start off with playing with your dog. Some of the same ones that we talked about here, you know?
that's great, Brady. I want to really acknowledge you for the work you do. I think dogs are such important beings that, as you say, guide us on a spiritual path. They teach us unconditional love. They teach us faithfulness. They teach us trust and so many other things. There's so much we can learn from dogs. And the more that we know what our dog also needs, I think it's good for both sides.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like there's so much to learn. I feel like everyone should take a communication class and have a dog before they have a kid because there's a lot of things that transfer over to just being responsible for having a pet, you know, meeting their
Well,
needs.
yeah, thank you very much for being on our show, Brady.
Thank you so much, Reino.